Hi, this is Misha. I decided to take a few-minute break from work and shoot another one of these videos just because I needed the break, frankly. Holiday seasons and whatnot, you know how it goes. I was thinking about a way to present these, and I figured why not look at some of the four-engine craft that the Federation had played with in the fictional Star Trek universe. So first up, we have the Constellation class, most famously known as the USS Stargazer. Also the Hathaway, I'd say, was pretty popular, well-known from Season 2 of Next Generation. This was commissioned in 2284 or thereabouts, so firmly in the late movie era. Next up, we have the Cheyenne class, which we already looked at briefly in the Wolf 359 video, but figured why not revisit. We only really know the USS Hawaii, which was in that battle blown up into bits. It is very much a Galaxy class kit bash, but in universe it would be part of that mid-24th century fleet. You know, could have been commissioned anytime, 2350, 2360, somewhere in that time period. And then finally we have possibly the coolest of these, the USS Prometheus from Voyager Season 4, Ship in a Bottle. And really that was its only main on-screen appearance. There was another one, sort of, in Enterprise. But basically, we just saw it in Voyager. And this ship kind of got its own episode, which is neat. Okay, so yeah, let's just, I don't know, ramble about these for a minute before I have to go back to work. Why not? The Stargazer was Picard's first command that he seemed to actually command for a long time before it was lost at the Battle of Maxia. I find it odd that, okay, they abandoned the ship, but it was obviously in working order, and that Ferengi captain picked her up. So why they would just straight up demand, abandon it? You would think they would either set destruct or, come back for it or something, not just leave it floating in space. It surely had something of value to the Federation on it. Anyway, story plot. Originally they were going to give Picard as his first command a Constitution class, but they decided to make this design at the last minute. Basically, it's a modified Constitution class saucer, and we have movie-era nacelles turned on their side, 4 of them, as you see. And the real-world reason was so people would, immediately identify it as not a Constitution or Miranda or any of those. In universe, we could say that it was a deep space explorer, or even an experimental craft for either more warp redundancy or maybe faster, more sustainable speed. Seems to be a little bit longer than a Constitution, about 310 to 320 meters. Crew of about 530. But at the same time, it seems to have a little bit fewer decks, about 15 give or take, which explains there's no real true engineering section or hull. It was obviously a rugged ship for it surviving as long as it did in deep space on its own. It's kind of much maligned. It's kind of brought up, like I said, in Season 2 when they were doing the war games. With Riker on board the Hathaway, it was kind of an old ship, but still seemed to be reasonably effective. Why not? I always thought it was neat, and I think it's neat that Eagle Moss did this model. I know a few others have done it, but it's not a very common model. And it's nice to see something in between the movies and Next Generation. Not a whole lot to say about it. We don't know a whole lot about it, aside from it's just an outdated design. We've seen a few others over time. For example, the USS Victory, from the episode where Data played Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty got up to his hijinks. But that's really about it. We don't see much of the Constellation after Season 2 or 3 of Next Generation. And I don't believe it's really made any appearances aside from maybe like on computer screens or models in Deep Space Nine. So moving on, obviously the 4 nacelle thing was not too bad, because they went to the Cheyenne class. Like I said, this is part of the kind of the Galaxy class fleet made for the Battle of Wolf 359. We have again 4 nacelles. They are unique nacelles. They're not Galaxy class. In reality, they actually used marker pens or highlighters, depending on which source you read. But in universe, they're their own nacelles. We can again assume this is kind of a deep space explorer, patrol craft. It's classified as a light cruiser. As far as I understand, the Constellation, for what it's worth, was either a medium or a heavy cruiser. We don't have a lot of data on the Cheyenne. We know it's about 360 meters, maybe 365. We don't have a deck count or a crew count. It has a thin saucer, kind of head-on, that bulges in the front and the middle, but it's pretty thin on edge. As I said in the Wolf 359 video, looking at this model, it seems like what the kit bashers did is they took 2 of the same halves from 2 different Galaxy class models, and they put them together to make this saucer because it has a different profile. It has more of a, honestly, a classic flying saucer shape where it's real thin and then bulges in the middle. So they use the bottom two bottoms of Galaxy class. Now I believe it is the Challenger, I had to go look at my ships there, that has the 2 top halves. Kind of interesting. It doesn't really have an engineering section. It has kind of these 2 pylon, one on the top here, one on the bottom. What this is the gooseneck, again evidenced for being the bottom, cut off from the Enterprise there. And then they just attached engines to it. In the back, it looks to either have a couple of large impulse drives or maybe shuttle bays. I kind of like the idea of shuttle bays because it feels like it might be in this area in here. But either way, part of the Wolf 359 fleet. And again, this is really something that I think really only Eagle Moss has done a dedicated model of, although I'm sure since it was a kit bash that people have made custom. And again, the only one we know of by name is the Aswani. And that seems to be it for 4 nacelle for some time until we meet the Prometheus, which when we see it is still an experimental craft. It's actually one of the better episodes of Voyager. I have my kind of complaints about Voyager as an overall series, but the thing is, it's fun. It's enjoyable, and this was one of the enjoyable episodes where the Doctor was sent back to the Alpha Quadrant and somehow landed on this critter here. Him and Andy Dick took the ship back from Romulan Tal Shiar. So this was classified as a Deep Space Explorer yet again, but in reality it was a warship designed to combat the Borg and the Dominion. But you know, the Federation can't just say, hey, we're making a warship. They have to have an excuse, so... Explorer, sure, right. It too has 4 Warp nacelles. Now, its excuse, it actually has 6 because it has that multi-vector assault mode thing where it splits into 3 halves because 2 just wasn't enough with the Galaxy and others. You know, visually, I'm sure on screen it looks cool. In reality, from a military perspective, this does not make any sense whatsoever because then you're making 3 warp cores, you'll have to have 3 bridges, 3 computer cores. And really having 3 small ships attacking has limited tactical advantage over one large ship, especially in the kind of, you know, naval 18th century warfare that Star Trek kind of replicates. But it's fiction, who cares? It was cool. It's got the arrow-shaped saucer that we see in some other later Federation ships. It's about 16 decks, so just one more than the old Constellation. It's about 415 meters, so it's longer than any of the rest, but then again, it's pretty narrow, so it makes sense. Still shorter than, say, the Sovereign, though, by a good bit, so relatively small, maneuverable ship. Capable of very high warp, got lots of weapons, of course. Pretty much one-shotted a Romulan warbird, which by this episode was maybe a bit of an aging design, but still very powerful, so hey, we know it's powerful. Why not? Like I said, we really don't see this outside of that one Voyager episode. It would have been nice to kind of see it in the Dominion War, but we do see it in an episode of Enterprise, and I'm going to talk about that later. But basically, it's in a future battle that Archer briefly visits in Season 3. But I'm going to set up that fleet in its own video, so, you know, stay tuned for that. So, yeah, the Federation keeps trying 4 nacelle ships, more than they do 1 or 3, although 2 is still very much the common, and what pretty much all of our hero ships seem to have. So, hey, I just thought I'd lay them out since there's only 3 here. And this is pretty much all we see in the series, at least up through Discovery. I haven't started on the Discovery thing yet because of how, well, I have really no good way to view it outside of the pilot episode. Because of the whole CBS All Access, I can't really use that on my computer. So, whatever. So, yeah, for the classic series, this is what we have. Yeah, just a fun little talk, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I actually like each of these models individually from Eagle Moss quite a bit, even though the Constellation gets a little flack. I still think it's a nice model. I really like the Hawani. Honestly, this probably looks nicer, more detailed than the studio model, such as it was. And of course, the Prometheus was a CGI model. So this is a physical, and there aren't that many. I'm not going to say this is the only one in existence, but there aren't that many Promethei out there. So it's kind of neat. Why not? As always, any questions or comments, post them below. The usual blurb of like, share, subscribe, of course, is much appreciated. And if you just, for some reason, haven't, check out our main professional website, or YouTube channel, Mishaco. We actually do serious things. This is Misha, and I will catch you next time.